So there's this one scene from the Owl House. Hi guys, Mr.Feedlestick back here with another insane video, and my mic, once again, does not work. Now Mr.Feedlestick, why are we talking about the Owl House? Well, because I noticed something that nobody else has, and that involves the giraffes. Now, you might think that that's just another gag, just a gag scene, not important, but you don't know the evolutionary and biological implications of that scene. So I'm gonna explain it. I'm gonna explain all of it. Now, in order to understand this theory, you gotta know what a giraffe is. So, buckle up, kids. We're about to learn some giraffes. So, giraffes are an African mammal known for having the tallest neck ever. Just a super long and girthy neck. Perfect for lots of things. Like eating leaves from very tall trees. Or eating leaves from very tall trees. I know, so much use for those necks. Now we have estimations that giraffes have been on the earth for about 20 million years. That's a 2 and a 0, next to a million. So that's a long time. Despite being very old, we only did the first classification of them in 1758, which was still a long time ago. But after being here for 20 million years, we only discovered them then? And the modern giraffes that we see today are only a version that's been around for about 1 million years. So an ancient giraffe would have looked something like this. Amazing what paleontologists can do. And how come the ancient giraffes didn't have long necks, Why didn't they have long necks, What's with that? So what giraffes are known for? Well, like I said, the modern giraffes have only been around for 1 million years. 1 million years, right? So evolution had not yet taken over with its body, giving that very long, elastic, girthy neck that it needs to reach those trees. The trees, I don't believe in trees, but it couldn't yet reach those trees. So, in order to get its food, because it's a herbivore, it evolved to get long necks. Having hooves doesn't really work for climbing up trees. And I guess the grass wasn't good enough for them. Picky fucking giraffes, hope you all die. And speaking of evolution, that brings me to my next point. Now, evolution doesn't just make things happen, alright? It needs a reason to make these traits appear, alright? And that's something called natural selection. It picks out the necessary traits needed for survival so that it can live and it can reproduce. Which is why there's so many of us in the world, right? We can stop begging, So, why would evolution follow something that looks like that? Right? But in order to figure that out, we gotta take a deeper look. Now, immediately you can see that this thing is no ordinary giraffe. It has a lot of insect-like qualities, or maybe even sea creature qualities. First of all, this thing has 4 eyes, and an abnormally large esophagus, and another esophagus. Now, that second esophagus, the much smaller one, was likely used to separate the windpipe and the throat. So it can breathe out of that one, but eat when it needs to eat out of the much larger one. But other than that, I can't think of an evolutionary use for any of these other things. Or can I? So obviously, the boiling isles and Earth aren't the same thing. One's fictional, one's our real world, alright? So, magic, alright? Magic can easily explain this, but I don't like that answer. Now, one thing that the show has made clear is that the Titan is the reason why the witches and demons exist in the Owl House. That thing that they live on is literally the corpse of a fallen Titan. I don't even know how Titans work. It's been confirmed that the boiling isles is the size of Vermont, which is, that would mean that the average Titan's height is about possibly 10 miles tall, just 10 miles tall. That doesn't seem long, but you have to realize how long a mile is for a living creature, right? 1 mile would already be tall enough, but Vermont is giant, right? It's a state. So really, it should have died from collapsing on its weight. Then the collectors just decided that, yeah, it'd be dead, But, Dana Terrace didn't think about that. What he, you're a great writer, but, that doesn't make sense. I mean, they would have to eat billions of tons of food just to stay in that form. But now it all makes sense when you bring up Titan blood. Now, what is Titan's blood, you may ask? Well, it's a pretty important thing in the series, alright? It's the reason why the door works, why there's a portal, how they're able to get in and out of the demon realm. But why is Titan's blood so special? Well, it might be the explanation of why life even grew after Titans died. So my theory is that because the Titans are so large, they realistically wouldn't be able to stabilize, being a living being. And so evolution basically made a failsafe with their blood. So when they die, that blood just starts gushing out, They become wetter than a girl near Justin Bieber, just gushing out with that blood. And that blood is independent, unlike our blood cells, which are dependent on us, Theirs are independent, like bacteria or algae. So, they can do life functions without the need of a body. Able to do respiration and all that. Yeah. And of course, evolution led those Titan blood cells to evolving into creatures. And just like in real life, all life began in the water. I think you know what I'm going now. So, since giraffes, at least in the Owl House universe, originally came from the demon realm, I think that the demon realm giraffes were sea creatures. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at first. But when you look at it at an evolutionary perspective, it makes a lot of sense. So since these boiling isle giraffes aren't the same as our real life ones, because they're not even from Earth, at least in the Owl House universe. Remember, it's about the Owl House giraffes, not real ones. But think about it. They have very long necks, alright? Now, why might a sea mammal evolve to have that? Well, because it's a mammal. They don't have gills, right? They have lungs. So in order to get oxygen, they evolved to have a very long neck to be able to poke their head out of the water. And then breathe in that good old air. Here. And this will also tie into something else later. And why do they have all those weird appendages coming out of their mouth? Well, to get a better hold of sea fish or another defense mechanism besides horns. To defense. Like, this is the demon realm after all. Right? Some insane shit evolves here. So it really needs that extra defense, which is probably why it has more eyes. To give it a combat advantage. While those eyes are focusing on the target, the other eyes can look in other directions for incoming threats. And with what we've seen in the show, that would be very necessary for natural selection. And this brings me to my next point.
Blue, da-ba-dee-da-ba-da.
All the way back in the first episode, we get this line from Ida.
I knew it!
Yep, griffins, vampires, giraffes.
Giraffes?
Oh yeah, we banished those guys. A bunch of freaks.
The boiling isles. There's a reason why it's calling that. Because the water boils, right? And where am I going? Well, if I do believe that these used to be sea creatures, at least in the universe of the Owl House, then when those waters started boiling, because I think they weren't always boiling. At least that's what we think from, when Luce went back in time, because the water didn't look boiling then. So whatever caused it, when it happened, the giraffes would have had to gone to the surface, because they can't live in the water anymore. And they were likely apex predators down there, right? Nothing about those features suggests that they were herbivores. So they likely started eating witches, and then those witches had to go at war with them. And since magic exists, they probably had some magical features that I couldn't have possibly theorized, because they are beast type. So I'm not sure if they do have a biosac. But there's a theory after all. And that's what led them to being banished, because they didn't want to deal with them. They likely didn't have a lot of witches back then to deal with all the giraffes coming back onto the surface. So, banishing them was the only way. And the giraffe still likely has an instinct to kill and eat witches. Maybe like an instinctive grudge, if you will, which is why they reacted specifically to Willow and Gus Amity when they saw us. They don't do that with normal humans. So more evidence that they did have some pretty crazy magical abilities to need to be banished and not just killed off. We'll also assume that giraffes just maybe 1,000 years ago. I think that's a pretty reasonable estimation of when they were banished to the human realm. Of course, in the context of the Owl House, remember, these aren't real life giraffes, alright? If anybody's still confused, alright? I don't have a script. You see me looking up or left. I'm not looking at a script. There's nothing else here. There's nothing else. I don't have a script. Where the heck did my microphone go? Oh well, I guess I don't have one now. Yeah, that's the theory. All right, giraffe went up the surface. It had sea creature like evolution in it. It got banished to the human world. Now it's humans' problems. Why were they nice to humans? I don't know. Because maybe it just evolved. Because it did have magical abilities, likely, right? We still don't know why they needed to be banished. Other than that, they likely went up to the surface of the witches. So maybe they just found that the human world was much more favorable. So all of its dangerous magical stuff just wasn't necessary. It just slowly faded away with evolution, which kind of doesn't work since I think that they were banished about 1,000 years ago. But maybe 1 million years ago also works. I don't know. The theory doesn't explain everything, but it does explain that. So I think that's a pretty good place to end the theory. There's not much else I can theorize about. I think that's pretty good. I went over natural selection, evolution, in the lore of the series, and biology. I may not be an expert, but I'm pretty good with what I know. Right. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Made another theory guy. For now, at least. I don't really know what else I'm going to post in my next video. Just kind of like posting whatever I feel like, I don't want a specific type of content I make. I just do what I feel like. In that case, the first 3 really true videos would be theories. If you can call the other 2 theories. Like I said, they're truths. This one's theory. very scientific theory. In fact, very scientific. Very much indeed. Yeah. Shout out to Andrew. You know, he really wanted a shout out for this video. Like, you may not know him, but you know, his name's Andrew. He wanted a shout out. You know. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is where it ends. I did find a microphone. I never lost it. Yeah. You should all watch Owl House too, alright? In the hope that it might get a season 4. As if Dana Terrace wants to do it. Subscribe.
Happy, lucky, konnichiwa, baby. Toriku wa tsurai. Hitankari Sunday. Happy, lucky, konnichiwa, baby. So sweet.